2019 regular meeting of the Newbury School District Board of Education is called to order. This meeting is being held in accordance with Section 3313-15 of the Ohio Revised Code. Ms. Palm, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Matthews? Here. Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Sedeby?
Here.
Mr. Simpkins?
Here.
Mrs. Zoll?
Here. Can everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 4th, 2019 regular meeting of the Newbury School District Board of Education meeting. Prior to this evening, each board member has received for their review and consideration the agenda and materials associated with each agenda item for the board's approval. The public can access the agenda through the district's website. The agenda is available through the district's website for public viewing the Friday prior to the board meeting. Board members have the opportunity to call the superintendent and treasurer for information concerning agenda items and to request, if needed, additional information. There are two places on the agenda when the board entertains comments from the community. The first hearing of the public is dedicated to those who wish to address the board on agenda items only. The second hearing of the public is dedicated to those who wish to address the board on any subject you wish to speak about, whether it be on the agenda or another issue. When addressing the board, please state your name, and comments are limited to 5 minutes. Please address questions to the president. Since we did the Pledge of Allegiance first, we'll move on to any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda. Are we making a correction to the executive session? Are we removing it? Do we need to do that? We don't need to remove it. Okay. Any others? Okay. Any corrections to the minutes? Okay. If none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedeby?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zoll?
Yes. At this time, is there anyone who would like to address the board on agenda items only? Okay. Next on the agenda is Dr. Holmes' report and recommendations.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. I'd like to recommend approval of consent agenda items A1 through A6.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedeby?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zoll?
Yes.
Thanks. I'd like to thank everyone who donated to programs benefiting our students, especially the Black Knight parents, for all of their generous support. Madam President and members of the board, I'd like to recommend a second reading and vote to approve the 16 board policies listed on your agenda. All of these policies are required to put us in compliance with the law.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedeby?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zoll?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the board, agenda item B2 is a recommendation to approve the Newbury Schools Inter-District Open Enrollment Policy for the 2019-20 school year.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? I know that there hasn't been any changes from what I understand to that, just so everyone's aware.
No, it begins on May 1st next year and continues until the beginning of the school year.
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedeby?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zoll?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item B3 is a recommendation to approve the 2019-20 school year calendar. It was developed by a committee of administrators and NEA members per our negotiated agreement.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion?
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedeby?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zoll?
Yes.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, our presentation. Mrs. Tomasetti is going to begin by recognizing this month's Students of the Month.
Good evening, Dr. Hoynes, Madam President, and members of the board. This month, our Students of the Month were knighted by the related arts teachers, and we have 6 students to recognize. I see 1 in the audience. I'll start with her. Ms. Bodner knighted Ava Now. You may come on up. And Ms. Bodner stated that Ava is a role model student. She always follows directions and cooperates well with others. She is very musical, and she shows excellence by always singing out in class. Mr. Fieldhouse knighted Isabella Taylor, and Mr. Fieldhouse said that Isabella shows outstanding effort of being a nice black knight. She always comes to PE with a smiling face, her willingness to volunteer for activity demonstrations, and being a natural leader in the kindergarten class. Ms. Tokarski knighted John Mayer, and she said that John is always enthusiastic and ready to learn during art. When he walks into the art room, he follows directions and models appropriate classroom behavior, and John is a joy to have in class. Mrs. Desati knighted 2 students. The first one is Brianna Griggy, and she said that Brianna always participates in a positive way in class, showing excellence. She is respectful to her other classmates, cooperates with others, and shows nice behavior in SEL at all times. Brianna shares connections to subjects we talk about and shows kindness to others. She also knighted Anthony Chiarella and said that Anthony follows the rules in SEL and is nice to his classmates. He is always willing to work with anyone as a partner and is a very kind black knight. He does the right thing and is an excellent example to his classmates of what being a good friend and student is. And Mr. Kennedy knighted Savannah Sinkovic. And Mr. Kennedy said that Savannah is a nice black knight, and when he sees her walking in the hallway with her class, she has the quiet sign up to help remind her classmates to be quiet in the hallway. She works cooperatively in music class, and she always has a smile on her face. And those are our students for the month of February, sorry.
Congratulations, Ava.
And I just wanted to thank BKP for their generosity for all the Newbury elementary programs that they donated money for this month, and for always being willing to donate and help us out in anything we ask them for. So it's very kind. Thank you.
Next up, Mr. Shaky.
Good evening, Dr. Hoynes, Madam President, and members of the board. I would also like to start by thanking Black Knight parents for all their support for our many programs, just a few of those are listed tonight. I'd like to recognize 2 of our student athletes tonight. Alex Pizzer and Mitch Sanders qualified and represented Newbury High School, the OHSAA State Wrestling Tournament at the Shot and Speed Center on the campus of Ohio State University from March 7th to the 9th. Senior Alex Pizzer qualified by placing 3rd at the Garfield Heights Regional in the 220-pound division and went 1 and 2 at the state championships, finishing 9th. His first loss was to the undefeated state champion in that weight class. Alex is a student athlete with a grade point average of 3.63 and will be attending Miami University in Oxford this fall. Junior Mitch Sanders qualified by placing 4th in the Garfield Heights Regional, also losing to the eventual state champion along the way. Mitchell went 1 and 2 at the championships and finished 9th. Mitchell is a junior with a 3.1 grade point average and will be returning for his 4th year of wrestling next year. It's such a great accomplishment to make the state, and the league that we transferred to a few years ago, the Eastern Ohio Wrestling League, made up 40% of the state qualifiers in all divisions. So it's, and we were Division III champions in that league. So I also want to commend Coach Yule and his staff for everything that they do for our wrestlers. This is the 4th year in a row the Reed State qualifiers. I would also like to commend the Newbury Band and choir members who did an amazing job of representing our school and community last week at Disney. I want to thank Mr. Kennedy and Ms. Bodner for their great leadership in this adventure. This was a 2-year labor of love to be able to do this. I also like to thank the music boosters and community members for their participation and sponsorship of this trip. And I'd like to thank the chaperones who volunteered to accompany our students on this great learning experience. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Mrs. Matthew, legislative report.
So the new funding formula was unveiled this Friday. That's what we've been talking about and covering the last year and a half, I guess now. Senator Representative Cupp and Patterson were head of that committee, and the hope is that it gets adopted by state legislation now. And I'll turn it over to Mrs. Palm, and she'll go through. She actually plugged in and had the ability to plug in how it will affect Newbury District specifically. So she's going to go over some of those details.
So as Mrs. Matthews said, the Fair School Funding Plan, we got our first glance at it this week. So it's a new formula that will provide instructional resources to ensure high-quality education for Ohio's children. Nearly all base funding, 95%, is for classroom instruction and instructional support costs, including classroom teaching, which is at 60%, educational supports, which is at 15%, and school operations at 20%. Decisions to spend base funds will be locally controlled, meaning we can control the class sizes or how many teachers are in that class, but we'll only get certain funding based on how many teachers are per class. So in the simulation that was released 2 days ago, we were able to see that the change in dollar amount they're projecting from fiscal year 19 to 20 will be a gain of approximately $21,935. And the change in funding from fiscal year 20 to 21 will be approximately $19,000. I am going to an additional training on it on Wednesday to learn more about it, so I will have more details at the May meeting.
Thank you. Next, I think Mrs. Pavick is going to make the Black Knight parent report.
Hello, everybody. At the end of February, we did the Cinderella Ball, which is a dance for the daughters and their fathers to come and dance. The theme was a masquerade ball. There was dancing and snacks, and as well as a mask making station where we also had winners in a contest, and the girls got a keepsake picture. And thank you to Kyla Joyner for organizing. Mother-son date night, we just had that as well. The elementary boys had a glow dance party with their moms. There was treats, dancing, glow sticks, lights, and even a photo booth. Those organizers were Amy Carver, Sarah Liston, and Amanda Hart, so thank you for that. We also just had Shamrock Skate. It was a success. The price of admissions was $1, as well as hygiene items, which were donated to the Newbury Food Bank. BKP scholarships are coming up and will be given out this week to the counselors. High school seniors can stop by the office to fill out an application. As we already discussed, BKP approved a $200 check for the robotics club and covered the cost for the 4th graders to go to the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad and the cost for 2nd graders to go to Progressive Field for the program. And they are also donating bounce houses for the PBIS award for the junior high school. The after prom night at the races was also a successful event. Thank you to parents, community members, teachers, and the teachers who came out to support the 2019 after prom. Tomorrow you can grab Chipotle and Concord from 4 to 8. They will donate a portion of sales to after prom. Please show your flyer. They're available on the website, and I saw some on the back of the table when I came in. The next BKP meeting is tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the PD room if you would like to join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mrs. Luoma is going to give a Newbury Joint Rec Board report.
Hi, everybody. I just want to formally introduce myself as the newest elected president of the Rec Board. acting. We're kind of trying to revamp the rec board, as some of you may know, and by doing that and following the current bylaws, we'll be asking for sponsorship from this board, 6 members, 1 joint member with the township trustees. We've posted advertisement in papers, on our Facebook page, and our website. We've already had 5 inquiries, which was good, and as soon as we compile a list of candidates that we'd like to push forward, we'll give that information to all of you and hopefully have a decision here pretty soon.
Thank you. Mrs. Vandermaas, NEA report?
My name is Kristen Vandermaas, and I am the Newbury Education Association Vice President, representing both certified and classified staff. On February 15th, Ira Merkin, a lawyer representing the Newbury Local School District employees, sent a letter to Dr. Marquardt, the superintendent of West Yaga Schools, discussing the conditions that have been placed on the supposed territory transfer between Newbury and West Yaga. These conditions have been discussed since January, when our board announced they were interested in a territory transfer with West Yaga. These conditions would leave approximately 87% of current Newbury employees unemployed. Dr. Marquardt's response was that West Yaga School Board has not insisted on a layoff of Newbury employees. Any decision involving a layoff of employees of the Newbury Local School District would be made by that Board of Education, meaning our board, and not the West Yaga Board. The letter also states that if the territory transfer goes through, it would be done without any conditions by them. Even if employees are RIFed in the spring of 2020, they're still employed by the Newbury Local School District on June 30th, 2020. Since the law states that employees who are employed by the school district on June 30th of the year of the transfer will become employees of the new school district, what's the point of the RIFs? Since West Yaga claims they are not asking for any layoffs of Newbury employees, even though a recent article in the Maple Leaf quotes West Yaga's treasurer as saying a reduction of staff to a level necessary to accommodate the needs of students added to the West Yaga Local School District as a result of the territory transfer are necessary, we want to know, is it your intention to RIF teachers prior to the transfer? Of course not.
Thank you. Moving on to section C of the agenda. Before I make the recommendations, the April board meeting has a number of required personnel items that might seem confusing. You will see recommendations for new contracts and continuing contracts, which is what seems confusing when you've heard about an upcoming reduction in force. Our negotiated contract calls for the reduction in force to be done at the May meeting. Our reduction in force is due to declining enrollment. At this time, this has nothing to do with a territory transfer. It is meeting the needs of our district at this point. I have personally met with every teacher who is part of the May reduction in force, or what's called a RIF. Although I will be making those recommendations at the May meeting, we are still required to vote on new contracts tonight. You cannot RIF someone unless they have a contract. If we didn't award a contract tonight, it would be for performance reasons, and we do not have any teachers in that situation. So there's a difference between a non-renewal, which we don't have any non-renewals, and a reduction in force. With that explanation, I would like to recommend the personnel consent agenda items C1 through C16.
Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion, anyone?
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedeby?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zoll?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the board, agenda item C17 is a recommendation to issue notices of non-renewal effective July 1st, 2019 to to the supplemental contract holders listed on your agenda. Again, this is part of the negotiated agreement. We need to non-renew all supplemental contracts to non-teaching employees, and then the positions will be reposted.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedivy?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zock?
Yes.
Agenda item C18, I'd like to recommend awarding one-year limited contracts for the 2019-20 school year for the teachers listed under C17 on your agenda.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion?
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedivy?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zock?
Yes.
Thank you, and that concludes my part of tonight's agenda.
Okay. Fiscal?
Moving for the treasurer's report, Madam President and members of the board, I would like to recommend the motion to approve the March 2019 financials.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just would like to comment that every time I've called you last minute with a question that I've noticed, you've been very responsive, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I realize in the 11th hour it can be frustrating, but I appreciate your kindness to those questioned expenses.
Anything else? Call the roll.
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedivy?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zock?
Yes.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, I would like to recommend the motion to designate Sarah Palm Treasurer as the designee for the Public Records Law training as described in Ohio Revised Code, Section 109.43B.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. Good.
Mrs. Matthews? Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedivy?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zock?
Yes. Okay, moving on to the Board of Education report and recommendations. I'll do a brief update for you on the territory transfer, and then we'll move on to the rec board update. Okay, so regarding the territory transfer, there was a delay in receiving the nightlines this month due to some issues with the publisher, but moving forward on a monthly basis, you are going to be receiving a territory transfer update monthly, and a quarterly full edition of the nightlines will be sent. For those who are attending scheduled board meetings and speaking with school administrators and board members and visiting our website regularly, these nightline editions may or may not provide new information. The nightlines is designed to communicate with the community as a whole, those who may or may not be attending. So if you have any questions regarding the information provided, please contact any of the board or Dr. Hoynes. Since our last meeting, Dr. Hoynes and Mrs. Palm and myself attended another meeting with the ESC and West Geauga representation, and it was a continuation of follow-up on meetings to touch base on the process and communication. We discussed that the superintendents in both districts are going to be coordinating specific transition plans as we return from spring break, which will first involve student groups and then parents and community members. And those specifics of the transition plans are going to be communicated once they're available on our website and through the nightlines. We'll also bring them here as well. We also discussed future meetings regarding the property and structure as it pertains to the territory transfer. West Geauga remains interested in having a joint meeting to discuss this topic. The first step in the process is going to involve a joint meeting with representation from West Geauga School Board, Newbury School Board, and Newbury Township, where I anticipate we're going to develop some sort of an agenda for upcoming joint public meetings. And that initial meeting should tentatively occur in May. So once I learn of that date, I'll share it with the board so you guys are aware that it's coming up. And then I'll come after and provide Dr. Hoynes with an update, who will also help us communicate the results from that meeting. The West G Board also has agreed to accept the recommendation of their Facilities Planning Committee, which includes exploring the construction of a new high school and middle school with shared auditorium, performing arts spaces, and athletic field house, and to consolidate eventually the 2 elementary schools on the central campus, most likely by renovating the current middle school for use as the elementary building. The project, due to its scope, will need to be funded by a bond issue. The board has no immediate plans to place a bond issue before the voters. A bond campaign requires a year to undertake. There will need to be a great deal of communication and attention to the specific, both physical and financial, of the project prior to asking the community to vote to fund it. The estimated cost of the project is $55 million. And I know that our board had requested an estimate, and that was the response that we had received. Also, West Geauga has, has provided us with some final acceptance numbers for open enrollment students for next year, and they're going to be adding 51 new students to their open enrollment. That's what their acceptance number was. And Berkshire has given us a tentative number for their acceptance so far, and it has been 13 new students that they've confirmed for us. Any questions about the territory transfer update? Yeah. Right, the tentative number from Berkshire is because their open enrollment has not closed, so they can't give us a concrete number.
And we reached out to Chardon, and I guess Chardon would be the only other one that might get a bulk of numbers for next year, just so we have all our bases covered in terms of our staffing for next year. Thank you.
Did they give you a schedule of, or have they talked about a schedule of renewals, levies, or anything else with that? I mean,
we are aware that they have a renewal that in May. Yeah. Is that what you're looking for?
well, I know they have a, but I mean, they're going to have to, they're showing a deficit within 5 years, so they're going to have to probably put on for new money that's even with the that's all, with the renewal line.
I think it'd be hard to anticipate going forward. I mean, we would have to anticipate future renewals or future levies in our independent state too. I think it's hard to anticipate those numbers when we don't have any of those available
I
to
mean,
us.
normally if you're 3 years out, you start planning for a levy. So, they have an idea, and that's my thing, is I want to know what their idea is. Even it doesn't have to be an exact, like I explained last meeting, it doesn't have to be an exact number.
You're talking about future additional operational costs?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we've not been notified of that, but if or when that's available, I'm sure that we can communicate that we'd like to. I think it's assumed we will communicate to make sure that we're aware of it when they do know. Anything else? Okay. Moving on to the rec board update, Ms. Loma came forward and did a brief update. I don't know if that's me, I'm sorry. But recently, just to give everybody some background, recently the joint rec board has changed officers, and throughout that transition, it's been discovered that they're trying to follow their bylaws and constitution, from my understanding. And the first recognized, you could say, error, or one thing they're trying to correct, is that the rec board has not obtained sponsorship for its members from the Newbury Township trustees or the school board. So in their bylaws, it states that the 6 rec board members are sponsored by the township trustees, and 6 members are sponsored by the school members, and then there's a joint member that both entities would sponsor. And the current members on the rec board are not currently sponsored, and as a result, their reorganization has been a challenge. So they reached out to the township at one of their township meetings and had contacted me to request to speak to our board to update us on what their processes are that they're trying to update. And as a result, since they've understood their issues. They've called 2 meetings, which the board, the rec board, and, the township and the school board were invited to attend, and the public was notified on those. So during those meetings, I did attend the 2 meetings that they had. I took some notes to update the board, to discuss and for consideration as we move forward. It was stated at the first rec board meeting that in 2012, the rec board received its 501c3 status, which some of the established members believe potentially separated them from joint membership from the school board and township trustees, and no longer required sponsorship from the township or school board. So I've reached out to our legal for guidance to protect the district and our board regarding our current responsibility to the rec board. I'm waiting for a response. And at this time, since the bylaws have not changed and there's no legal opinion on the 501c3 status and how it affects its membership, the current bylaws are being followed until we have anything to say different. The current bylaws state that the rec board secretary is responsible for providing the school board and township trustees with their monthly meeting minutes and financial reports. And I'd like to suggest to our board that we enforce that bylaw. And it seems that there have been questions about the financial reports and decision-making within the rec board, and if the school board and trustees have sponsorship of the board, we should be enforcing the bylaws as well as reviewing these documents until we are advised otherwise from our legal counsel. Regarding the stated discrepancies in their financial reports, I do not find it appropriate for our treasurer to be reviewing the financial reports of the rec board at this time. I suggest to our board that Mrs. Palm not be involved in reviewing these reports until our legal counsel advises us that it's something that falls under her responsibility. Regarding sponsorship from our board for the Regarding sponsorship from our board, for the rec board members, I would suggest that the board not vote on new members until proper notification to the public has been posted. Sounds like that has already taken place. All community members should be notified that there are open rec board positions and given an opportunity to show interest and provide the board with a letter of intent. And those of you in the audience that have any interest in serving on the rec board can contact them. And as I stated, Ms. Loma is the current president and she can assist you in that process. Any question with the rec board and what the current state is? Okay. So we'll wait to hear any update from our legal. I will let you guys know when I hear any meetings that happen that involve the invitation of both the school board as a whole or the township. Our board has been advised to notify our public to make sure that they're aware that those meetings are taking place, and we have done so since we've been invited. So we'll continue to do that if we continue to be invited to those. Okay. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Then, let's see, are we not doing an executive, right? Oh, public appointment, sorry, yeah. Is there any unfinished business from public comment that anybody would like to come speak and address the board? Okay. All right, we have an executive session on our agenda, but we are not going to entertain the executive session, so we can move to adjournment of the meeting. Is there a motion? So moved. Second.
Mrs. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sedevi?
Yes.
Mr. Simpkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Zock?
Yes.